And this is a question I don't think's been asked in the climate area. You know, what kind of cooperation do we already have? We have all kind of people claiming that they're cutting back on emissions and all that stuff. Maybe they're all just lying to us, and they haven't done anything that they wouldn't. It isn't in their very narrow self-interest. But if you have people cooperating, then putting on the social cost of carbon as a Peruvian tax would be overkill. We need to know how people are cooperating. Now, what's interesting about climate change is these third parties are so far flung around the world, into the future, not even being born. So maybe you think there isn't any, it would be difficult to sustain any kind of cooperation. But again, empirically, I see people at least claiming, companies claiming that they've cut their emissions for this social good. And I think you would want to account for that. And you could think about how to set up a tax scheme to kind of move the red dot right on to where it belongs. Like in the case in Bob's case, maybe if we gave the revenue to the town. We charged an excise tax on the factory, gave it to the town. Said, okay, here's the tax, clean your water as you wish. What would be the problem with that? Or maybe there's no problem. Would they still want to approach the factory and ask for them to cut? Yeah. Well, if they ask the factory to cut its chemical dumps, they're going to lose revenue, right? They're getting paid. Yeah. Instead of the revenue going to the faraway treasury, is my first example, it goes to them. So you might not have that problem, that they might stop bargaining at that point. But is there any other problem with that solution? Well, let's look at your homework. What did you guys come up with in the homework? So in the homework, to remind you, we're going to have a carbon tax starting in next year, 2024. We'll collect it throughout the year. And then year one only, at the end of year 2024, you can take your carbon tax receipts and show it to the IRS, and they'll give you that money back. And furthermore, you keep those receipts, and every year you can get carbon tax money back according to how much tax you paid in 2024. Anything wrong with that scheme? Yeah. Yeah, in 2024, we want to buy in gasoline and all kinds of stuff because I have, it would give me a right to a share of the excise tax in the infinite future. So how does that apply to our Bob's town? Maybe too many people live in the town. This is not a good place to have a town downstream. Too many people are going to live in the town. It's a less dramatic example than the one I gave in the homework. What's the other problem in the homework? We're taking a break here for the homework, but let's go back. What's the other problem in the homework? What's been, as Bob said, these kind of carbon tax schemes with rebates have been advertised to make you whole. Say, now one problem is I think Bob suggested $1,000 a person per year. One problem is that, well, people aren't the same, right? They're all going to get the same 1,000, but some of them maybe live in rural areas, or they need to fly planes a lot or whatever, and they're going to be hurt by that scheme. Now, the scheme I gave on the homework was to try to say, well, let's try to redistribute the revenue in a way that gets more revenue to the people who are carbon intensive in their behaviors. Yeah.
But people who aren't actually using like that much carbon, they're basically like not seeing that much revenue from those taxes, right? So
In my scheme, right.
yeah. So that's also, it feels like they might be experiencing some externalities from others using carbon more, but at the same time, like they aren't really seeing that revenue back in their pockets.
What is it? What does the revenue back in your pocket look like in this picture? Move up which curve? Yeah. But do you get back to this indifference curve? Why not? You're saying no. You mean higher geometrically? I mean, higher numbers and difference curves are down, right? One of the problems that, remember the deadweight cost. So the guy who is a carbon intensive consumer, he may be getting revenue back, but he also has had to change his behavior. And the gap, we can see the effect on the change in behavior. So making the carbon intensive people whole is going to be quite hard. Not going to have enough revenue to do that. And that's, I think, a bit of sleight of hand when people say, well, this is a rebate. Don't worry, we'll make you whole. From the Treasury perspective, they're promised to whatever revenue comes in, they will distribute it back out. But we know that's just part of the cost of raising the price of carbon intensive goods. There's also the excess burden cost. Yeah. Yeah, that's Bob got into those issues, which are very important. Quantitatively, this is a big deal. But even in the zero tax world, we have this problem of making people whole. It's not enough just to make sure the Treasury is empty of revenue.